Welcome to Whatsoever More or Less. Decided I'm going to start saying that. My name is Jason, and I am somebody who just loves reading Ezra Taft Benson and H. Rowland Anderson and Dallin H. Oaks, and have for years, and tried to work my way through the Constitution until eventually hit this point where it just makes sense to me, so I just comment on it now. So at this point, today I'd like to talk about the last in time rule versus the supremacy hierarchy, we'll call it, okay? And the original view, the tradition of the founders, which is what we've been exhorted to follow according to David O. McKay and Ezra Taft Benson. And honestly, if you study Dallin H. Oaks, I believe he's right there with them. The tradition of the founders and the words of the prophets. So here it is. So basically, we don't want more or less than the Constitution allows. We want it cut and dry. We want to understand it real straightforward. So first off, what is supreme? What is the highest in the hierarchy? It's the Constitution itself and the amendments, which for all intents and purposes are part of the Constitution. Then it's bills that are passed to become laws through the Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process. Then it's treaties that are passed through the Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 process, which only use a portion of Congress. Even though it's 2/3, it leaves the popular house out of it. So, and then you have state laws. And I feel it's important to clarify this too. Judicial rulings are nowhere in that hierarchy. They do not become any kind of law at all. They simply become sentences or rulings or decisions that deal with the case. So they're not in there. President Oaks was very tactful when he addressed this issue in his University of Virginia speech. Basically, he wanted to say, let's get past this here. Let's talk about that the courts are ill-suited to the legislative lawmaking process, and they're constitutionally obligated to leave their authority to nothing but the cases before them. Okay, so hopefully this is getting clear enough. If not, if you're experiencing cognitive dissonance, I'd like to skip this topic a little bit for now and just focus on this, because now we've got, so that's our main hierarchy then: Constitution, laws, treaties, state laws. Okay, now we have the last in time rule. Okay, by the way, if anybody tells you that there's parity between treaties and laws, there isn't, there can't be. That's not the way the founders saw it. Historically, treaties were only allowed to deal with international issues, so they would have mainly affected border states. That's the reason for the supremacy clause, right? And anyhow, there was concern from the founders that someday in the future, Article 1, Section 7, Clause 3 was literally written to try to stop people from bypassing the Section 7 process to create binding law that was enforceable among the citizens. Okay? So Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 cannot be used to bypass the Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process. Okay? So one is the treaty process, the other is the bill process. The bill process is superior to the treaty process. It brings in the popular house, which Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 opens up, emphasizing, hey, we're reserving certain powers strictly to the House, period. We're prioritizing the House, prioritizing the popular House. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, again, just some people will tell you that there's parity between laws and treaties, but there cannot be. That's inconsistent with the tradition of the founders, and they tried their best to prevent that from ever becoming the case, because they foresaw the nature of man and trying to explain around things and work around things. So now we have the last in time rule. So the last in time rule, say for example you've got two laws, one that was maybe passed in 1940 and then another law that was passed in 1990, and they're in conflict with each other. They're both passed through the same process, Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2. At that point, the one that's passed last in time, 1990, supersedes the one before it. Okay? Or let's say, for example, the 18th Amendment actually is a great example. The 18th Amendment banned the sales of alcohol, the Prohibition Amendment, right? What is it then? The 21st Amendment, I believe, is the one that canceled it out. So all they did is they just created another amendment, and they said the 18th Amendment is null and void. That's all. And that's all it takes. Let's look at another example, constitution-wise. So we have Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, that a lot of people like to call the elastic clause, which is really annoying. I am sorry. That's such a manipulation of what that really was intended for. I mean, to start off, the original text already said it had to be necessary and proper, and Madison had very stubborn views, the father of the Constitution. I'm guessing he knew what he was talking about. Can we say he knew what he was talking about? All right, I'll agree with you. He knew what he was talking about. And so it was already a very strict requirement. It had to be both necessary to the foregoing powers and proper to the whole purpose of the Constitution itself, right? Actually correct, right? So it couldn't just be an elastic clause like a lot of people want it to be. But the Anti-Federalists weren't satisfied. They said, you got to lock this in. You got to give us some rules of construction with some amendments. And so we got the 10th Amendment, which is the rule of construction for that. It says, all powers not reserved to the federal government or prohibited to the states are reserved to the states. That's the last in time. Which came last? Okay, the 10th Amendment came last. It should supersede any confusion about the meaning of the 10th Amendment, or Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the necessary and proper clause. Let's take a look at the taxation clause at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, and some of the other requirements in other portions of Article 1 regarding taxation. What came later on in time? The 16th Amendment. And so we don't tax according to what the original wording of the Constitution says. We tax according to the 16th Amendment. Let's look at the manner of electing senators. We have earlier clauses telling us how to elect senators, but then the 17th Amendment comes along and changes it. This is the last in time rule. The last in time rule only applies to stuff that's on the same level within the hierarchy. So say, for example, you got the Second Amendment says, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's an amendment. That's part of the Constitution for all intents and purposes. Then you've got a bill that's written through the Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process in the 1930s called the NFA, right? National Firearms Act, I guess, right? So supposedly that's the last in time. The problem is it's not on the same level in the hierarchy in the first place. It is way lower. I mean, it's significantly lower. So you've got Supreme Court judges saying, no, yeah, but you can go ahead. The Constitution surely was only intended for this and that. Okay, show me where the Supreme Court decisions are in the hierarchy again. Oh, yeah, they're not there. Okay? And to top it up, what allows them to redefine the words in the Constitution? Let's look for anything there, please. It's not there again. So the fact that they've ever been included as the final binding interpretation of the Constitution is an offense to the oath of office itself, is repugnant to the Constitution itself. And it allows for this bypassing. Apparently the Supreme Court at times has said that there's parity between the treaty process and the Article 1, Section 7 process, the bill writing process. But that cannot be so. It was not originally so, and it does not make sense. The popular house is there for a reason. It's literally the most undemocratic thing you can say. Treaties were only meant for international relations and never for the internal governing of the country at all. So it should have nothing to do with bald eagles. It should have nothing to do with owls. It should have, all that is internal management, and it is none of the business of treaties to deal with that stuff. Anyhow, so once again, if we're taking an approach that I talked about recently, I called it the holistic textualist approach, which avoids us doing whatsoever more or less, but helps to keep us thoroughly honest, right? Okay. So the holistic textualist approach, looking at the words in their original meaning they had at the time the Constitution gained legal force, right? And if we're looking at that, we have to prioritize the hierarchy first. Then if there are two things that are on the same level in the same chain of hierarchy, at that point, then the last in time rule applies. There is no parity between treaties and laws. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. And the founders expressed concern that anybody would ever try to view it that way. And sure enough, the Supreme Court went ahead and said, yeah, we're going to try to view it that way anyhow. So, which they don't have the permission to change those things like that. They just don't. There's nothing in the Constitution that grants them the power to. So again, last in time only applies when they're on the same level in the hierarchy. Other than that, whatever's higher in the hierarchy wins every time. and that is a true, honest, holistic, textualist approach to the Constitution. And that's my thoughts for today. Please like and subscribe. I am committed to continuing to try to build up confidence and understanding the Constitution, especially amongst the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm going to just go ahead and focus, perhaps more than a lot of other people, on the Constitution and on the words of the prophets regarding it, so that not that I'm trying to steady the ship or anything like that, or the steady the ark. Just I feel there's maybe a lack of confidence out there, and I just wanted to kind of contribute. So thanks again, guys.